So welcome for today's DeepSense Discovery session. We are joined by Sheamus MacDonald, who is the CEO of Sedna Technologies. And we're really excited to hear from him because he's created a fascinating company. And there's lots of questions we have that can really help us understand Sedna's growth and development in the ocean sector and in the tech space. So bread and butter of DeepSense. So Sheamus, welcome. And we're happy to have you.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
So the first question is going to be, of course, around your company. Can you help us understand a little bit what Sedna's goal is today and long term?
Yeah, so Sedna operates, we do a number of different things, but our end goal is to track, trace, and monitor seafood from catch to plate. So while that could be commercial fisheries or it could be aquaculture, we're able to combine both traceability as well as condition monitoring to understand the quality of a product and help ensure that it gets to market. So a very simple example would be lobster fishing. We have applications for lobster harvesters where we monitor the live wells of their vessels. So where they're holding product for an extended period of time. They can view the water quality parameters in real time. And by doing so, if there's a change in the water chemistry that could jeopardize the health of the product, they're able to intercept it. In addition to that, further down the supply chain, when they actually land at dock, we have a number of solutions that work for buyers and processors where they actually purchase the product through our mobile applications. So in doing so, they get greater insights on the production planning, so they can actually see exactly how much resources is being extracted, whether or not to send a truck, and how best they can kind of optimize their own business supply chain. And then following that, coming into the facility, we again monitor those conditions. So now we know where the product was caught, the conditions it was held on the boat, where the product was landed, and the conditions it was held within the facility prior to export. And in doing so, we're able to ensure that that product actually has kind of the criteria to make it further along the supply chain to another vendor, actually like for lobster, all the way to China, for example. So we're really maximizing the amount of product that's harvested and making sure that that actually gets to market rather than turning into waste or turning into a product that's not worth as much money as it would be if it was sold live.
So it's extremely complex and a lot of steps down that entire supply chain. So can you help, for those who aren't familiar with your background, help people understand what your background was to start with and how you ended up coming up with this idea?
Yeah, so I grew up in a commercial fishing family. Basically, as far back as I can think, on my father's side, we're all fishermen, as well as my mother's side in Cape Breton. So I really understood the importance that it has to rural communities, both from the economic side of it as well as the livelihood, the cultural and livelihood. So when I actually went to university, for my undergrad, I studied fisheries, and I followed that with a master's in fisheries as well. And I was working in oil and gas at the time, and I just found that it wasn't exactly what I wanted to do. I was really drawn to the ocean. I was really drawn into commercial fisheries and aquaculture. So I actually came back and I began consulting with a number of rural cooperatives and helping them kind of optimize their supply chain by just, working in different companies. I kind of saw how those larger companies and corporate companies operated and thought I could take that kind of business approach to more rural companies. And while I was doing that, I was kind of accomplishing what I was doing now, but I never really understood the power of technology and what it can play. And my roommate in university was actually working on, prior roommate in university was working on supply chain technologies. And he approached me and said, "Hey, I'm looking for a new supply chain. What can we do?" So basically kind of took my experience and what I saw as the vulnerabilities within the supply chain and took his tech knowledge, and we actually built out the platform to make it relevant to the industry.
That's incredible. And I have loads of questions, so I realize they might not always come in a sequence that makes sense. But I think, so what you were creating something that really, what were people doing without having this product existing? Like before it existed, what were people doing to try to solve the problems you're solving?
Yeah, so the problems always existed. I think prior to us coming in, take a lobster buyer, for example, they would do everything by pen and paper. While pen and paper kind of did the job, there's also a lot of human errors in between that. If a paper gets lost, then that's missed inventory. Missed inventory is obviously a huge value loss. So we basically digitized that approach. So it was a mix of business operations, and then we kind of combined that with traceability to give them greater insights. So just the access to data So something that they've previously been doing, we just gave them the ability to see that in real time. And in doing so, you can kind of optimize the way people use that data. So by speaking with them, they say, hey, this is a good use case for this. And then you kind of build out those applications to make them more and more relevant. Because a lot of the times too, for us, our clients actually see kind of, oh, this fits perfectly. It does what I want to do. But actually, once they start using the software, they're the ones with the true insights on what that data can do. So it's really paying attention to them and listening to their concerns and then using the data to make that more and more relevant.
And have you had any struggle, like at DeepSense, we deal with companies and with data and trying to teach people what data can do for them. Has it been hard for you to convince your customers to trying to adopt technology and change their processes a little?
Definitely. Yeah. That's a big thing. I think that's like any innovation. You're changing kind of the current market, practices, and a lot of people don't like change. The big thing for us is just kind of taking a simple application. So taking something as simple as you no longer have to use pen and paper. You can now just do it through this mobile app and just show them a simple user interface that does the exact same job, but just the data that collects alone and being able to do that in real time has massive value adds. So that's kind of our approach to our customers. It's just a simple solution that solves an immediate problem, and then just allowing them to work with us to find out exactly what they want to get out of it and build from there.
Well, and what piece, like as you were creating the company, it sounds like you've scaled, you started with solving one problem and then it continues to add on and solve more problems somewhere along the supply chain. How did you create the technology in the background? Because you came from fisheries, your roommate came from a supply chain. That doesn't mean you both are experts in sensors and complex data.
Yeah, so it was kind of a mix. I think it's something that we learned as we went in. We didn't have an answer to every single problem, but it was stuff that we saw as market opportunities. So taking sensor data, for example, prior to us kind of being able to provide a sensor that did things in real time so they can monitor their facilities remotely, they would be paying an individual to go in, maybe 3 times a day and taking a manual test strip to test for ammonia, for example. While it did the job, there's a number of human errors, is the light proper and different things like that. So it just left for a lot of vulnerability. So it was things that they were doing, and what we ended up doing was not focus so much on just building the sensor at that point, but working with other companies that provided those sensors and integrating them into the platform. So kind of giving an all-in-one solution while still our focus on combining both condition monitoring and traceability. So our expertise kind of came in the operational procedures and processes, and how to build those out. And then we just use relevant technology to kind of fill those missing links.
And when you think about the scale of your company and how it's going to continue to grow, what are kind of some of those things that you're looking to bring onto your company to help your company grow? Like what are some of the skill sets and the individuals and the resources you need?
Yeah, so no, that's a great question. Kind of looking ahead, actually, one thing that we were able to do, and just back to the sensor talk, is we can actually, we did develop recently our own sensor. So it basically took all of our learnings over the past 2 years, as well as client requests, and kind of built a more robust solution that's more scalable. So we're currently working on that. We'll be in market, well, technically, I guess, in market now with it. And it's a very appealing solution that kind of, it touches along everywhere in the supply chain. The same kind of application can be used. And what we look for is kind of that drive. One thing is to develop a product, but obviously having the interest in the product and what that product actually does is something that we look for. So we look for people that are excited to work on a project, but also try to help us solve those problems.
And in terms of the data piece, so we're data people, and so we're always really curious about the kind of skills that you started with in your company and then what you added. So when you've hired, you have people who have more tech backgrounds now.
Oh, yeah.
What was the first resource? Who was the first resource and who's the first skill that you were looking for?
So data related, we actually took on an embedded software engineer. So again, it was somebody that could understand exactly the complexities we were dealing with. So, to be able to get data and get it within, I guess, let's say market price, you have to be really cautious of what are the latest technologies, what are the best platforms to build off of, what's scalable. So by bringing somebody on with that experience, we're able to kind of build the product out and understand the infrastructure and understand exactly not what we need currently, but what are we going to need 2 years from now when we look to solve this next problem. So it is forecasting and understanding not only the technical development that needs to be done, but also not limiting yourself to building something out that you can't get access to data that you think you're going to want 2 years from now.
And so when you're hiring, you can hire someone who comes fresh out of school. You can hire someone who's also worked for another startup. You can hire someone who's worked for a massive company. Are there certain things that you look for when you're hiring?
Yeah, I think the startup's the real, I don't want to say it's the riskiest bet, but it is probably the most entertaining and exciting. Like for us, when we began our company, you have to be a jack of all trades. You have to be able to do everything. And even although we're kind of moving away from that because we filled a lot of those positions, that's something that we really looked for when we were hiring somebody that might have the technical expertise, but also be able to facilitate some other position within the company. Startups you have to be able to pivot. You have to be quick on your feet and adapt. Whether it's market changes, pricing changes, you might find a technical hurdle that you don't think you can get around. So that's one thing that we look for. But in saying that too, I mean, any kind of big corporate experience or any experience with a big company is also good because it shows structure. So I think it really comes down to the personal, what does the employee actually want out of a position? There's one thing to get paid and deliver your position, but what's your end game? Is it to grow as an employee and understand a new skill set and do that and take that value? Or is it to, just show up to your job every single day?
Absolutely. I think, yes, any company, regardless of startup or larger corporation, probably, yes, wants someone who is really invested in their organization and their role for sure. Now, in terms of your, the data that you collect, can you tell us a little, and obviously please feel free with sharing the pieces you feel comfortable sharing and don't share what you don't really want to share, but data is a challenge. So have you run into problems with data collection issues or storage or cleaning? Can you explain any of the challenges you might have had?
Yeah, so while our company was focused more on the actual hardware and real-time monitoring sales, so our data analytic play, call it, is something that's still coming up. We're still collecting that relevant data and we're understanding ourselves what data is actually relevant before we build out that piece of the business. So I wouldn't say that we came across anything in terms of like the actual structure of it. However, that is this phase that we're moving into currently. But we do collect a lot of data. We have, I think we're upwards of 80 clients now, both North America, Europe, Australia, New Zealand. So we're kind of all over and we're seeing different trends and different things. But in saying that, different data means different things to different companies. So that's the other thing to be cautious of. You don't want to be chasing after something that only one company sees relevant. So it's really understanding what does the market want and what's the most generic kind of data visualization piece that people actually want to see and pay for.
Absolutely. Yeah, that makes complete sense. And in terms of your skill set, I mean, when you first started, you had a really small team, and from a technology stack standpoint, like, can you also explain a bit about the early days versus moving to building your own sensors? Those early days, you did have some technology expertise because you had someone make you a website. What were the skills and the breadth that first engineer you had? What were some of the things they did for you?
Yeah, so we did we had a bit of a different approach. We used a contractor as well. So kind of bringing in a team of contractors really helped us understand what skills we needed before we actually went ahead and hired internally. That really gave us kind of to shed light and say like, no, this is our moneymaker. This is what we need to focus on. This is kind of where we go. In looking at doing that, I think it just came down to kind of, small projects and understanding, yeah, this worked, this didn't work. Well, who worked on that project and what was their skill set? Just to try to optimize, obviously, we were a bootstrap startup. So, we didn't have a lot of money to throw around. So we really had to kind of more or less take a chance on different things and understand different skill sets to find out exactly what we were looking for before we made those initial hires.
And if you had somebody who was trying to work for you today, how would you want them to get in? I'm not asking people to get in touch with you for jobs, but let's say somebody was really, really interested in what you're doing and thinks that they would be a great asset to your organization.
Mm-hmm.
How would you like people to present themselves to you? And what are some of the things that people need to show you to try to convince you that they would be a great candidate to work with you?
Yeah, I think a big thing for us is just understanding the problem we're trying to solve. You know, it's a very, I think we've spoken a number of different times, so you understand it, but it is a very complex problem. There's a lot of moving parts within the supply chain. So for us, it's somebody that, you know, if to get involved with what we're doing is just kind of see that end vision and that end goal. So really, it's, I mean, researching the industry. What is the pain point and why is that a pain point? You know, we were able to identify it and find a way to solve it. But solving I don't know how to word it correctly, but solving the problem is one thing, but understanding the problem you're trying to solve is, you know, that's because there's different things like there's blind spots that we might miss that somebody else, if they really understood the problem, understood the client, they can really help us with that technology development.
And one thing that I think we've run in sometimes with students has been the idea that sometimes people assume that a task or job might be handed to them and clearly articulated. So if your job is to go in and help an organization or a company build something, the first question is, well, where's your requirements documentation? Mm-hmm. Well, I feel like you guys sometimes aren't sitting down and planning out documents and writing various statements down that you require. So can you explain a little about the agile nature of how your team works in developing and figuring things out?
Yeah, so for us, we basically kind of from a top-down approach is we look at the problem from a market side of things and say, how big's the market? Not how big, but how big's the problem? Is there something out there that can solve it, whether it's an existing technology or it's something that we think we can build internally? And then just kind of working down to make sure that it's scalable. So thinking of every possible way that something could go wrong, whether it's, you know, power connectivity of a sensor, or it's you know, the sensor not being returned, and then looking at different things like price point, and then just making sure that there is truly some validation there. And then what we do is actually kind of look, okay, how do we build this out and how do we want to build this out? Is it something we want to offer as a product itself, or is it something we want to offer as an add-on to build out an analytics play for? So for us, I think it's kind of a never evolving I guess, description of what you're being told to do. However, the kind of broad picture of what the end game looks like, we always have, you know, we always have it available that people can look at. But we're never able to sit down and draft up a full plan because it just changes all the time.
Absolutely. And time, it takes time. That's the other challenge. So you talked a little too about how data is going to become more and more part of what you're going to end up doing. Building sensors and collecting that data is really important. So if someone were to work for you and help you try to solve some of those problems using machine learning and more advanced analytics, is there anything that you have right now that you can share that would help people understand how you formulate that as an idea in a company? Like, I know I've got lots of data. Do you have an idea already of the problems you can solve with that data? Or would you be looking for someone to come in and say, let me have a look at the data and see what kind of problems I can solve with it?
Yeah, we have an idea. I think a simple example would be, we have a simple accelerometer in one of our sensors. It's in a water quality sensor, which you might not think is relevant, but it's something like that. We can use predictive analytics to understand the performance of an engine of a boat. You know, once you collect so much data on an individual sensor and understand that the vibrations have changed over time, that can tell you a number of different things. The vibrations come from the engine of the vessel, so whether that's a loose belt or maybe there's, you know, extended driving time. So it's little things like that that we kind of have built out and know what we're going to be able to do with the data. But that is a very simple example of something that we'll be able to derive from it and offers a solution to somebody. Because another big thing is rural communities, it's very costly to have technicians come in. It's very costly to haul your boat up and fix your engine. So any kind of, well, it's still predictive. It's something as simple as that, and having insight into that can save our clients a number of dollars.
So in terms of the scope of the data that you collect, I mean, I tend to think of traceability, but you're talking about the operational piece as well. So there's so many multiple uses for all of the data that you're talking about.
Yeah, and even on the traceability standpoint, it's something as simple for a bioprocessor to understand, knowing where the harvesters are fishing, and then start taking lobster. And when they use their grading process, they can start to understand what size lobster in different areas and in different things, so they can optimize their own supply chain. So while lobster's caught with all different sizes, the bioprocessor may have a stronger market for a particular size, so they can start optimizing their own business to make sure that those lobsters are actually in and out of water as fast as possible.
Amazing. And So I think the question that is always coming up these days is around COVID. Can you talk a little about what COVID's meant to you guys as a company, and
Yeah,
has it delayed?
it's been a big change. Again, I think, we're a victim of it because our clients are. It's something that I don't think anybody could have predicted, but yeah, it's made things challenging for us, both from a development standpoint where we're limited to the amount of exposure we can have around each other, as well as getting to see our clients. Our business is done face to face for the most part, so it's been a real change not being able to meet clients directly. And in addition to that too, I think travel restrictions. So we work with companies all over. If they have something with a problem on site, we're not currently able to go there and actually help them with it. It's something that we have to troubleshoot over the phone, which while we've been able to do, it's not the ideal way that we want to provide a service.
Absolutely. I think one of the things though that, we've engaged, we're looking at different projects over the summer though with some students too to support you in terms of data. And I think one of the things that has resulted in a bit of a slowdown is that people might tackle problems they might not otherwise have had a chance to tackle. So there may be some silver linings to some pieces, but
Yeah,
some other negatives
yeah.
too.
No, exactly. And I think even for ourselves, just even our own operation, like internal operational stuff, we've learned a lot about our company. We've, spent more time in actually, use data, for example, this is the data we're collecting. While we have time, what can we do with this? And start looking at those things and planning those things out.
Now, from a company standpoint too, I'm assuming you, well, of course you have a longer pipeline of what your product looks like and what your roadmap looks like. Are you able to share a little about what you expect to see in the next 5 years for Sedna?
Yeah, I think while currently we're a big mix of kind of everything. We have hardware, we have data analytics coming, and we also have software as a service. What we've been able to do while we've only been in market for about 18 to 20 months, one thing we've been able to identify is how to simplify our own product offering while meeting the same goal. So, a big component of what we're doing to develop internally now is stuff that we had previously developed, but just simplifying it. And whether that's doing it in it's not completely changing the platform, but it's giving a product offering that might do two things rather than having two products that do one each. So it's little things like that that we're really trying to harness, but our end goal is still the same. So 5 years from now, I can see us being more of a hardware provider, but also very strong on the analytics side.
Now, I'm going to ask if anybody who is listening online has any questions to feel free to slot those into the Q&A section. Please feel free to send those out. I could turn your speakers on if you'd like as well, let me know, but so you can ask yourself. In terms of, I'm just looking through, I have a list of questions, so I'm just looking through to make sure that, that I'm not missing anything. One thing, how did you learn about, were there sources that you use when it comes to things like data governance? And I realize you're growing the data piece of your organization, but your sensors were collecting data. There's some rules that had to go around how that data was collected and any metadata associated with it. Mm-hmm. How did you guys figure out how you were going to collect some data and store that data?
Yeah, I think a big component of that was we did work with third parties on it. So where we use third parties, kind of their sensor data, looking at their terms and conditions and speaking to them about what we're collecting and what we're doing. That was a wealth of knowledge, as well as we've been through a number of different accelerator programs. So that, again, was something that really helped us. And there is a number of professionals, again, just even in the local, industry that we relied on to kind of build those things out. But I think it's something, we're very cautious about. Everybody is very cautious about data and who owns data and what they can do with data. So for us, again, while we analyze and do different things, it isn't our data as a company. It's still our clients' data for anything that we collect.
And have you had any challenges with that from a pushback from clients? Because sometimes people don't like you to know too much information.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. It's a question that always comes up, who owns this and what are you doing with it? We're very upfront. We tell them exactly what we're doing with it. We're not exactly, taking taking their data and selling it by any means. That's not what we do. We will provide analytics to them specifically based on the data that we're retrieving from them.
I think it's all really good lessons because I think no one's an expert in everything. And I think one of the key messages that you've definitely shared has been going out and seeking advice and counsel from others and learning from others' experiences and getting some input. And also the fact that you don't need to hire a full staff for everything you need in your organization. You can pull in those resources as needed, which I think is pretty key too, because sometimes when people are looking for a role, they're looking for a role that's a permanent role. But it's nice to know sometimes that there's other opportunities out there to work for companies and help them solve a problem and then go work for another company and help them solve it. Or at the same time, know that you're going to go into a company and do one part, but someone else can take on the parts that you're not the best at.
Yeah, and that's kind of a company focus too. We try to have with employees is what they're comfortable with. We've hired employees before and said, these are all the duties that we're looking to fill. You can come in and kind of pick around and try different things. While they might not have been as technical positions, it's something they might have began in sales and said, this isn't for me. And then they went into operations and project management. So that's happened before as well. And I think that's just something that a lot of people don't quite understand until they get in with the company and say, that's where I want to be. That's what I want to do. And would much rather have somebody that excels at a position than somebody that's stuck in a position and doesn't want to move.
Absolutely. Now, I'm just going to put that last one out there. I don't have any questions that anyone's asked. So I don't really have any other questions. I think this has been super helpful and I'm happy that you were able to come in and share. This has been a really good experience for us to ask the questions and learn from you. And also, we're really excited to see the evolution of Sedna as data gets used in different ways and maybe new novel applications of the data are applied, and we're here to help. So thank you very much for joining us today. And if anyone else has a question, please throw it in. This is your last call. Otherwise, thanks so much for joining us, Sheamus. This has been great.
No problem. Thank you.
Have a good day. Bye, everybody.
Bye.